For the past 23 years, NBA.com has held their annual NBA GM survey, a series of questions polling all 30 GMs on various superlatives, predictions, and more. Out of the 50 questions that they asked, most of the answers made sense. Which team will win the 2025 NBA Finals? Well, first place was the Boston Celtics with 83% of votes. Also, if you were starting a franchise today and could sign any player in the NBA, who would it be? Well, first place was Victor Wembanyama with 77% of votes. Another question was who is the best head coach in the NBA, and for the 5th season in a row, Erik Spoelstra won this vote, this time by 69%. Again, most of these questions are pretty easy to answer and have a pretty clear candidate for first place. However, unlike all other 49 questions, one asked in the miscellaneous section wasn't that simple. Which team's level of success this season is toughest to predict? All of the other questions had a straightforward process to answering them. There are statistics, historical information, and predictive models to lead you to a choice. But for this question, to deem a proper answer, there's a lot more that goes into it than just what's on paper. Each team in the league has a ceiling and a floor. It's impossible to precisely predict what that is for each team, but most people have a general idea of who is going to be good and bad. However, to choose a team that you're most unsure of is a much more difficult decision. Nobody knows how well a team full of new stars will mesh together, nor does anybody know if a team full of familiar faces will break out or fall apart. Most likely though, it would make sense that a good mix of the two would make a team's success harder to predict. Nevertheless, each GM tackled this question with their own methodology, whatever that might have been, and ended up with a list that looks like this. First place was the Los Angeles Lakers with 17%, and tied for second were the Houston Rockets and New Orleans Pelicans with 13%. Since the end of the 2024 season, LA most notably added just 2 players, Dalton Knecht and Bronny James. The difference, though, lies in JJ Redick's hands. In just his first season in an NBA coaching role, Redick has been given the task to turn one of the most mediocre teams in the league into NBA champions. Meanwhile, the Rockets, similar to the Lakers, made just 2 major additions to their roster, drafting Reed Sheppard 4th overall and adding Steven Adams back to the depth chart after injury sidelined him for all but 2 games last season. However, what makes the Rockets unpredictable is their potential to break out this season. With both Alperen Sengun and Jalen Green looking to jump into superstardom, how Udoka will be handling the team's young talent is completely unknown. To add on to that, the team is jam-packed with potential waiting to get their opportunity. Jabari Smith Jr., Amen Thompson, Cam Whitmore, and Reed Sheppard will all be throwing this team's future into the air. But unlike the 2 teams finishing above them, the Pelicans made a blockbuster deal this offseason by acquiring DeJounte Murray. Just viewing the way that Murray's breakout changed the Spurs offense and how his presence changed the Hawks' scheme upon trading for him, it's clear that New Orleans will not look the same at all next year. With Zion Williamson's health and dedication always being a concern, who knows how high or low this team will finish in the competitive Western Conference. The main takeaway from all of this is that predicting unpredictability is, well, unpredictable. Each GM has their own thought process and way of answering this question, and deciding an answer is tough to do, even in hindsight. There's truly no correct methodology in answering a question like this. Or is there? Before every season, Las Vegas's most popular sportsbooks set an over-under for each team's win total. For example, the Sacramento Kings line sits at 46.5 this season. Rather than using this number for betting purposes though, this can be used as a prediction on how good the Kings will be. It makes sense that the Kings will likely finish the season around 46 or 47 wins. By comparing every team's projected win total, taken before the season starts, to their actual win total, taken after the season ends, we can then find which team's levels of success were hardest to predict. After gathering data from the last 10 years, here are all 300 seasons in each team's results, or how much they were over or under the predicted line and by how much. At the moment, nothing may pop out. However, with this data, a method to predict the most unpredictable team suddenly begins to appear. By first analyzing the information and then finding a pattern, it's possible to narrow down our options to just a handful of teams that, by the end of the season, may find themselves in a spot nobody expected them to be in. Similar to how the most esteemed, knowledgeable managers in the NBA chose which team is hardest to pin down, we'll be doing the same. However, unlike them, there's a method to our madness. To begin, it's important to know that there are two different types of unpredictable: unpredictably good and unpredictably bad. And although both serve as the answer to our question, to assess how to predict each one is a very different process. So let's start off with teams that fell below expectations being unpredictably bad. Here are all 12 teams that fell 14 games or more below their projected win total. Out of all 12 teams, 10 of them suffered from one particular problem. And out of all 12 teams, 9 of them suffered from one more problem. By themselves, both of these can be a sign of a team possibly falling below expectations. If both of them were to align though, that's a recipe for disaster. Here are the ingredients. The first one is being over-dependent on stars, with some unluckiness. Being over-dependent on stars is a problem that many teams have, and it doesn't always go wrong. The greatest case of this is with the Golden State Warriors. In 2022, Stephen Curry proved his worth by leading the Warriors to their first ring since Kevin Durant's departure in 2019. However, what would have happened if Curry wasn't there, or even if Klay Thompson, the other Splash brother, didn't play? Of course, Golden State wouldn't have been able to win it all, but could they have at least floated? Well, look no farther than the 2020 season, where both Curry and Thompson were out with injury. Thompson, infamously, tore his ACL in the final game of the 2019 NBA Finals, taking him out for the entirety of the 2019 to 2020 NBA season. With this in mind, the Warriors' over-under line sat at 47.5, a reasonable number for a team who, despite losing Kevin Durant during the offseason, was still coming off of a finals appearance. Then, in just the fourth game of the season, Stephen Curry fractured his left hand. He would only return for one more game for the rest of the year. The Warriors could survive above 500 after losing one star in Klay Thompson, but losing Curry was different. They needed him. Luck will play a big part in any season, and one injury is the difference between winning it all and not even making it out of the first round. However, in the Warriors' case, going a whopping 28.5 games under your expected win total isn't just being unlucky, but it's being poorly built. To find a team that was unlucky, yet still were able to hang around the projected level of success, look to the 2023 Minnesota Timberwolves. In the 21st game of the season, Karl Anthony Towns suffered a knee injury that would sideline him until the last 8 games of the season. However, unlike the Warriors, Minnesota was able to keep up their play and went 26-26 without Towns, actually better than the 10-11 that they were before Towns' injury. The Timberwolves' ability to adapt and shift gears when losing a star is an important lesson for all teams to not fall into the same trap that the 2020 Warriors did. And just in case it may seem like Golden State is being singled out, here are the other 9 teams that suffered a similar fate. Teams can only do so much to prevent injuries and avoid the brutality of them. However, to soften the blow, it's important to build a team with the ability to adapt to adversity. To find the next team that might appear on this list, begin by looking at a team that might be too overdependent on their stars. The next reason that a team might fall far below their win total is that big off-seasons lead to bigger expectations. Just 1 year after the Lakers hoisted up the Larry O'Brien Trophy, Rob Pelinka decided to make a blockbuster deal for Russell Westbrook. Trading several key pieces, including Kyle Kuzma and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, the Lakers had to make big adjustments to their playstyle going into the new season. However, with 3 superstars now on the roster, the basketball world was convinced that Los Angeles was on the verge of a big season. At this point though, most of us know what happened. Anthony Davis and LeBron James were suffering with injuries, Russell Westbrook struggled to find a place in Frank Vogel's offense, the big 3 never clicked, and the Lakers failed to even make the play-in tournament. Of course, the inadequacy of the 2022 Lakers took place on as big of a stage that this phenomenon can be possibly seen. However, it's been happening across the league for years. It doesn't even have to be players. In fact, most of the time it has nothing to do with the players at all. All 8 of the remaining teams made a coaching change either the season before, during the offseason, or at the beginning of the season. Some of them even made changes to who their GM is. A coaching change turns an organization upside down. Bringing in a new culture, scheme, and playbook, a new coach can come in all different forms. The 2021 Rockets' hiring of Steven Silas and Raphael Stone brought in a new era of Rockets basketball. The 2022 Trailblazers hiring of Chauncey Billups and Joe Cronin gave them a refreshing new look at a roster that needed change. The 2016 Pelicans hiring of Alvin Gentry made it clear that Anthony Davis was the one and only focus of the franchise. For all of them though, hope was being built up just to be shattered. With this observation, we can see that growing expectations based off of an off-season move can lead to disastrous predictions. But now, let's move on to teams that rose above expectations. Here are all 11 teams that rose 14 games or more above their projected win total. Out of all 11 teams, 8 of them thrived from a particular source. And out of all 11 teams, 8 of them thrived from one more source. By themselves, both of these can be a sign of a team possibly rising above expectations. If both of them were to align though, well, that's a recipe for success. Again, here are the ingredients. Breakout inbound. In the summer of 2017, following a first-round sweep at the hand of the Cleveland Cavaliers, new executive Kevin Pritchard turned the Indiana Pacers roster upside down. In a blockbuster deal, Paul George was headed to Oklahoma City in return for Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis, a package that was widely seen as completely insufficient to match the price of the superstar forward. Tag this along with the fact that Jeff Teague, CJ Miles, and Monte Ellis were all not returning, and it was clear that Indiana was in need of a hero. Enter Victor Oladipo, the former second overall pick who would now be on his third team in just his 5th year in the league. Up to that point, he had shown some spouts of greatness, but his inefficiency and inexperience still made him a work in progress. However, in Indiana, Oladipo would now use everything that he learned under Russell Westbrook and use it to be the leading scorer on the team. It was hard to see at the time, highlighted by the fact that he began the season with plus 2,500 odds to win Most Improved Player, which was behind or tied with teammates Miles Turner, Domantas Sabonis, and Bojan Bogdanovic, but Oladipo was due for a breakout season. With Oladipo coming into his own, the entire team followed suit. Indiana finished 48-34, soaring past their over-under of 31.5 wins. Oladipo went on to almost unanimously win Most Improved Player, and although you don't need to win it to lead your team above expectations, you still gotta get pretty close. Even when including the 3 teams who didn't have someone as a final candidate for Most Improved Player, each team had at least one player in the top 10. It's clear that if a team is going to finish much above expectations, they're going to need to start off with a player or two breaking out. It makes perfect sense. Expectations are set on how well a team is likely to play with their current roster. What isn't put into account is that a player might look completely different the next season. In the case of CJ McCollum in 2016, it was most certainly not accounted for that a player who was averaging 6.8 points off of the bench would turn into a star guard who averaged 20.8 points per game in 34.8 minutes. And for Draymond Green in 2015, everybody knew that the Warriors would be good, but nobody expected for their backup sophomore forward to suddenly become one of the best defensive players in the entire NBA. The Most Improved Player award is always the most difficult to predict. Not a single winner since 2018 started the year off with better than plus 1,200 odds. However, if you can somehow pin down a list of guys who are going to be top candidates this season, it can possibly lead you to the answer of which teams will be able to finish much better than expected. The next reason that we can point to is that out of all 11 teams, 8 of them thrived from having low expectations despite having a great offseason. Finishing 15-67, the 2013-2014 Milwaukee Bucks were the 18th worst team in NBA history. After making seemingly minuscule changes to their roster, the Bucks over-under sat at an embarrassing 24.5, the second worst in the NBA. The biggest differences to the roster were second overall pick Jabari Parker and new head coach Jason Kidd. The Bucks were better, and that was clear from their projected 9-10 game improvement from the season before, but nobody expected them to be 26 wins better. Whether it was due to Jason Kidd's new scheme, or the incompetence of previous head coach Larry Drew's old scheme, or the development of Giannis Antetokounmpo and Chris Middleton, Milwaukee was playing on a new level that nobody had expected. In fact, if it weren't for Kidd's adamant adoration of Michael Carter-Williams, the Bucks likely would have finished the season easily above 500. If only the NBA world had known the potential that Milwaukee had, it wouldn't have come as such a surprise that they were capable of making the playoffs. Indeed, this is held true for the majority of teams that we're looking at. When a team's bar is held low, there's a more likely chance that they soar above it than a team held to a high standard. A common problem with these low bars, though, is that they're all made by either undervaluing or overvaluing major offseason moves. To look at a list of teams who had undervalued moves, not a single expected win total properly accounted for the fact that each team improves throughout the offseason. Like the 2022 Cavaliers, they traded for one of the best stretch fours in the league, traded for one of the best playmakers in the league, and drafted the second best rookie in the league. Yet their projected win total was just 2 games better than that of their previous season. By overlooking major offseason moves, low expectations may be inappropriately imposed on a team. However, this may also go the opposite way. By overvaluing losses to a team, it's possible to overlook the additions that the roster made and not see that the team is still capable of performing at a high level. With these 3 teams, we see this clearly. Yes, it's reasonable to think that the Trailblazers were going to get worse after replacing all-NBA forward LaMarcus Aldridge with Al-Farouq Aminu and Mason Plumlee, but to have predicted that they would become one of the worst teams in the league was simply an overreaction. The same goes for the Thunder, who were expected to be 16.5 games worse than the previous season after they traded Paul George and Russell Westbrook and got pretty good returns. Whenever any team blows up their core throughout an offseason, it'll always be difficult to predict how much it will affect their record. However, these cases are unlike most. To see how this goes most of the time, let's look at the 2019 Cavaliers. They, like the teams above, were previously a playoff team. But over the offseason, they lost their star and completely changed the structure of their roster. However, Cleveland didn't recoup in the same way. After losing LeBron James, the only major addition that they made was drafting Colin Sexton. Clearly, the Cavaliers were going to get worse, garnering the over-under win total of 30.5, which was much lower than their 50 wins the season before. This is what's supposed to happen when a team loses a star. And it's also the same reason that when teams change their core, it's expected for the team to suddenly become much worse. But in the case of the 2016 Blazers, 2018 Pacers, and 2020 Thunder, they lost their stars, yet were able to find strong replacements. The overreaction to their losses couldn't see this though. If a good team were to trade away their stars over the offseason, but still make great additions to rebuild their roster, they could be the next team to shock everyone by playing surprisingly well. So, what we've discovered is that a team will most likely finish far below expectations if they are over-dependent on stars and make large off-season moves that lead to high expectations. Meanwhile, a team will likely finish far above expectations if they have a player due for a breakout season and have low expectations despite improving over the off-season. Knowing this, let's look at the NBA now and predict what teams will be most unpredictably good or unpredictably bad. By looking around, there are 4 teams that match our criteria, and we're not going to be right about all of them. Surely, we're not going to be right about the teams that we didn't choose to be on our list either, but based off of our data, at least one of these teams' level of success will have been the hardest to predict by the end of the season. Well, hard for everybody to predict, but us. Here are the teams. First off is the Charlotte Hornets, who have an over-under of 30.5, and I'm predicting them to be unpredictably good. After LaMelo Ball went out with an ankle injury in just the 15th game of the year, the Hornets' entire 2024 season was completely derailed. Just 2 seasons removed of the team's 43-39 finish, which was good enough to earn a play-in spot, the Hornets now find themselves at the bottom of the Eastern Conference once again. Knowing this, the Hornets' win total line sits at 30.5. Which is their lowest since 2021. However, this season might shape up to be one of the biggest in the franchise's young history. Without Ball last season, the Hornets went 14-46, a horrid win percentage of 23.3%. With him though, Charlotte was 7-15, a mildly better win percentage of 31.8%. And although Charlotte was worse without Ball playing, the team got better throughout the season. Last January, the team traded their starting shooting guard Terry Rozier. The next month, they moved both Gordon Hayward and PJ Washington at the trade deadline, fully committing to opening up the game for rookie Brandon Miller. Though the team was dedicating themselves to their rebuild, the Hornets went 11-21 following the trades, which was much better than the 10-40 that they were before. If the team would have played on that pace all season long, they would have finished with 28 wins, just 2.5 games behind their win total line of 30.5. Now, add a healthy LaMelo Ball, who clearly made the team stronger last season. And add a healthy Mark Williams, who before his injury at the beginning of last season was nearly averaging a double-double on an extremely efficient 64.9 field goal percentage. And add Josh Green, who the team landed as part of the deal that got Klay Thompson to Dallas. And add Tajane Salon, a top recruit in the 2024 NBA draft who brings very much needed size. With all of these added pieces, plus new head coach Charles Lee, Charlotte's win total of 30.5 sits astonishingly low. The Hornets also have multiple most improved player candidates. Since his All-Star season, Ball has only played 58 games. Looking forward to, hopefully, his first healthy season since 2022, Ball is a prime candidate to break out into superstar territory. Also, there's Brandon Miller, who, in a way similar to Ball's career trajectory, is preparing to break out into an all-star in his second year in the league. Meanwhile, there's Mark Williams, who has only played 62 games in his career. If he could string together a healthy season, he'll finally get the chance to ascend into the all-star tier. Overall, the Hornets' 2024 season was disastrous, but the bright spots throughout it have fallen under the radar. The Hornets are being criminally underrated, and with a new coach, renewed health, and multiple players looking to break out, Charlotte might just be the team to take off this season. The next team on our list is the Detroit Pistons, who have an over-under of 25.5, and we're saying that they're going to be unpredictably good. The tale of the 2024 Detroit Pistons may be enshrined in time for the rest of NBA history. Losing 28 straight games, the Pistons have the longest losing streak across a single season ever. Thus, it makes sense that Detroit's line was set up at 25.5 wins, which is the fourth lowest in the league. However, Detroit has the potential to surprise a lot of people. Of course, the most memorable part of Detroit's last season was their 28-game losing streak, but what most people don't remember is that the Pistons went 10-31 in the second half of the season. It's horrible, but the team at least showed some form of life. Throughout this period, Cade Cunningham looked amazing despite struggling with injuries. Monty Williams consistently started Jaden Ivey, which led to increased success, and the roster was ridden with injuries to Asar Thompson and Isaiah Stewart. With all of this factoring in, Detroit had the potential last season to finish well above their 14 wins. If they had been healthy in that second half of the year, they could have reached 20 wins easily. With new additions, Tobias Harris and Tim Hardaway Jr., bringing in the veteran leadership that they lacked last season, Detroit has done nothing but improve since their humiliating first half of last season. New head coach JB Bickerstaff is going to leave this team shrouded with questions until the season begins, but Detroit has no reason to be expected to only win 25.5 games next season. Though their current roster seems like they have the potential to win possibly 30 games next season, what isn't accounted for is that they have a load of young talent ready to break out. Former first overall pick Cade Cunningham is returning from injury to add upon a season where he did nothing but improve. He was much more efficient when scoring, became a consistent three-point shooter, and turned himself into a legitimately strong playmaker. If he can build upon all of this more, especially with Detroit adding pieces to make his job easier, Cunningham is a prime candidate to win Most Improved Player. His partner in the backcourt, Jaden Ivey, is looking to do the same. A major story of last season was Monty Williams' misusage of the sophomore guard. With Bickerstaff coming in to change things up, if Ivey's value is properly seen, the explosive guard may see an explosive burst onto the All-Star scene. So, the Pistons had a rough 2024 season, and their expected win total follows suit. But looking into the details of last year and this past offseason, Detroit is on the way to surpassing these low expectations that have been placed on them. With both Cunningham and Ivey ready to see their all-star potential come to light, the Pistons might just have one of the biggest turnarounds in NBA history. Up next on the list is the Los Angeles Lakers, who have a 43.5 over-under, and we're saying that they could be unpredictably bad. Because they're the Los Angeles Lakers, LA's 2024 season was put under a microscope every step of the way. With every loss and ounce of frustration expressed by either LeBron James or Anthony Davis, the NBA world made lofty predictions on what the Lakers' next step would be. Would they trade for a third star? Would they switch up their entire core surrounding James and Davis? Would they just trade their superstar duo and reset? Well, none of that happened. In fact, the Lakers' trade deadline and offseason was one of the most uneventful of them all. Their most major move? Hiring JJ Redick, the new head coach of the most hyper-analyzed team in the league, whose only coaching experience was for his son's 4th grade basketball team. The Lakers perfectly matched our criteria of an offseason move raising expectations. Though LA's only other major additions this offseason were draft picks Dalton Knecht and Bronny James, the team's losses of Spencer Dinwiddie and Taurean Prince were only enough to drop their expected win total to 43.5 wins. Granted, it's not like that win total is wildly high. The team still has LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and the rest of their core that got them to 47 wins. However, to criticize Darvin Ham's inexperience in coaching and inability to handle a head coaching role, but then sign a coach who has never coached in the NBA, is putting your team on a house of cards. It's never okay to wish a predicted injury upon a player, but it must be acknowledged that the chance of both James and Davis having injury-riddled seasons is high. Last year's 71 games was the first time since 2018 that James has reached at least 70 games played. Meanwhile, Davis's 76 games was the most that he's ever played in his career. It was truly the first time since the bubble that both players didn't sustain serious injuries, and to predict that this will happen again is just blatantly ignorant of the truth of this Lakers duo. Los Angeles hired a new coach, raising expectations for a team that doesn't deserve to be considered as likely to finish over 500. Their 2 stars, who the Lakers have previously proven to be extremely dependent on, are both injury-prone. If LA were to get a stroke of unluckiness, which of course, hopefully they don't, and Redick doesn't turn out to be the coach that they hoped for, well, the Lakers aren't going to finish anywhere near that 43.5 win mark. Lastly, it's the Portland Trailblazers, who have an over-under of 22.5, and we're predicting them to be unpredictably good. The Portland Trailblazers might have been one of the most disappointing teams of the 2024 season. With a completely new look, head coach Chauncey Billups was tasked with leading a fresh new era of Blazers basketball. Unfortunately, it didn't go how fans wanted. 3rd overall pick, Scoot Henderson, was projected to have a monster rookie season. Instead, it took him until February to come into his own. DeAndre Ayton would be getting the keys to a team for the first time in his career, but he struggled to ever leap into stardom. Anthony Simons had control of the offense, which looked great when Damian Lillard was out the previous season, but he struggled to stay healthy. The list of reasons for excitement about this team went on, including the potential of Shaedon Sharpe, Jeremy Grant, and Rayan Rupert. However, the list of reasons for disappointment turned out just as long. This season, the Blazers' line for win total sits at 22.5, just 1.5 games above their 21 wins last year. It simply doesn't make sense why they're barely expected to improve. Almost the entirety of Portland's core struggled with injuries last season. Henderson played 62 games, Ayton played 55, Grant played 54, Simons played 46, Malcolm Brogdon played 39, Sharpe played 32, and Robert Williams played 6. It's the biggest reason why last year was such a failure for the team. Now, they're mostly healthy. Plus, the team added Danny Avdija and Donovan Clegan, 2 young players likely to propel this team with some added depth. If Portland can get a fully healthy season from their young group of talent, the team is going to soar past their record of 21-61 from last year. With the team hopefully being healthy next year, it's time to build excitement again for this squad. If Simons can become more efficient, a healthy season from him could lead to an all-star appearance. The same goes for Ayton, who has always been loaded with potential. Likewise, Henderson is on the horizon of a massive sophomore season that is reminiscent of stars like Darius Garland, De'Aaron Fox, and Zach LaVine. All across the roster, the Blazers are stacked with potential. If even one player can take that next leap, expect Portland to be the biggest surprise in the NBA. Portland's poor showing last year has fooled many into thinking that they're a bottom feeder in the league, when in reality, all they need is some time. Time to get healthy, time to figure out their roster, time to adapt to the ever-changing landscape of the NBA. Through it all, the table is finally set for Portland to shock the world. So, which team's level of success this season is hardest to predict? Well, we defined difficulty to predict a team's level of success as the deviation from a team's betting line for win total to their actual win total. Then, we found this deviation between expected and actual win total for every single team in the past decade, and by analyzing the teams with the largest deviations, we were able to find multiple commonalities between all of these teams after separating them into 2 types of deviation, negative and positive. By looking at all the teams with large negative deviations, which are the teams who fell far below their predicted win total, we were able to find that most teams, 1, could not survive injuries to their stars that they were over-dependent on, and 2, had overblown expectations due to a large move in the offseason. By looking at all the teams with large positive deviations, who are the teams who rose far above their predicted win total, we were able to find that most teams, 1, had a breakout star in the most improved player race, and 2, had undervalued offseason moves that led to low expectations. Finally, by looking at the NBA and considering whether or not each team satisfies these conditions, we found 4 teams whose final win totals are likely to have a large deviation from their expected win totals. The Charlotte Hornets, the Detroit Pistons, the Los Angeles Lakers, and the Portland Trailblazers. From our formula and data analysis, this answers the question that all of the NBA GMs were split on. These are the teams whose level of success will have been the hardest to predict by the end of the 2024 to 2025 NBA season.